You slept 8 hours. You ate nothing. Your stomach is empty. Logically speaking, your body should now begin burning stored fat. That is exactly what most people believe. But what if, in the first 30 minutes after waking up, the opposite is already happening? What if two seemingly harmless morning routines send your body a signal that locks visceral belly fat tightly in place before breakfast is even considered? In the first 45 minutes after waking, the human body undergoes a powerful hormonal event, the so-called Cortisol Awakening Response. During this phase, cortisol levels rise more sharply than at any other time of the day. This hormone is not an enemy. It is an ancient survival signal, deeply rooted in human evolution. It activates circulation, sharpens the mind, and prepares the body to provide energy. But what matters is not the rise itself. It is what happens afterward. What occurs in the first hour of the day determines whether this natural hormone surge activates metabolism or signals the body to store energy. This is precisely where almost everyone makes a mistake. It is not the calories, not the breakfast, not even the workout. It is the unconscious signal set in motion in the first minutes after opening your eyes. Before the first sip of coffee is taken, before the day has truly begun, a biological decision is made in the background: release fat or hold on to fat. Today, step by step, we decode what happens inside the body during these critical minutes, why belly fat is particularly sensitive to stress, and how a small change in the morning can reset the entire hormonal trajectory of the day. This is not a motivational speech, not a diet. It is pure biology.
Inside every single fat cell resides an enzyme with an inconspicuous name, lipoprotein lipase, or LPL for short. You can imagine it as a gate. When this gate opens, energy flows from the bloodstream into the fat cell and is stored. If it remains closed, no new energy can be deposited. This small enzyme plays a decisive role in whether the body burns fat or preserves it. And here, cortisol enters the picture again. In the morning, cortisol naturally rises. If this rise is clear, brief, and rhythmic, the body understands it is morning, time to provide energy, time to access stored reserves. Metabolism becomes flexible, fat can be released and burned. But if cortisol does not fall again, if it remains elevated for hours, the body interprets the situation very differently. Biologically speaking, chronically elevated cortisol means danger, uncertainty, possible famine. In such an environment, it would be evolutionarily unwise to release energy. So the opposite happens. The LPL enzyme is activated. The doors of fat cells open inward, ready to absorb and store any available energy. Visceral fat in the abdominal area is particularly sensitive to this process. Studies show that these fat cells possess significantly more cortisol receptors than fat tissue in the arms or legs. They hear stress signals louder. So when cortisol remains unnecessarily high in the morning, belly fat receives the message first: store, secure, do not release. This explains why two people can eat the same calories and perform the same workouts, yet see completely different results when it comes to belly fat. It is not just about energy intake, it is about hormonal signals, and those signals are often set in the first minutes of the day. The first habit that disrupts this delicate system begins while still in bed. The hand automatically reaches for the smartphone. Messages, emails, social media, headlines. What appears harmless triggers a measurable reaction in the body. The blue light from the display is strong enough to irritate the brain, but not strong enough to properly synchronize the natural circadian rhythm. The internal time center, the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the hypothalamus, receives conflicting information. At the same time, the nervous system reacts to the content, problems, conflicts, demands. The brain hardly distinguishes between real threat and digital stress. The sympathetic nervous system is activated, heart rate increases, breathing becomes shallow, cortisol remains elevated. The body starts the day in alarm mode, and a body in alarm mode holds on to fat. The second habit often follows immediately afterward: coffee on an empty stomach. Many believe coffee provides energy. In reality, it merely blocks a molecule called adenosine, the signal that creates fatigue. Overnight, the brain reduces adenosine, but this process is not yet complete upon waking. If caffeine is consumed immediately, it blocks adenosine receptors before the system has had the chance to regulate itself. The result is an artificial state of alertness. Several hours later, when caffeine's effect wears off, the accumulated fatigue returns in full force. The body responds with another cortisol surge to maintain energy levels. This additional stress impulse in the afternoon intensifies cravings for sugar and fast carbohydrates, and once again, LPL is activated, especially in the abdominal region. Thus, a hormonal cycle forms that repeats daily, a cycle not based on weak willpower, but on biology. And precisely for that reason, it can also be biologically corrected.
The solution does not begin with restriction, but with sequence. Not with extreme discipline, but with precise alignment to your own physiology. The morning is not a neutral time period. It is a hormonal window, a sensitive transition between regeneration and activation. And when this window is used correctly, the metabolic direction of the entire day changes. The first step is surprisingly simple: hydration before stimulation. After 7 to 8 hours of sleep, the body is measurably dehydrated. Through breathing and sweating, it loses up to a liter of fluid overnight. The blood becomes more viscous, and the heart must work harder to transport oxygen and nutrients. This additional effort can further elevate cortisol levels, not from psychological stress, but from physiological strain. So instead of drinking coffee first, a diuretic that further increases fluid excretion, a large glass of water with a small amount of natural salt sends a completely different signal. Sodium supports blood volume, stabilizes blood pressure, and relieves the adrenal glands, which are responsible for cortisol production. It is a quiet but clear signal to the body: supply is secure, no emergency. The second step addresses humanity's oldest timekeeping system: light. Daylight is not a luxury, it is a biological time cue. Even on a cloudy morning, natural light is many times more intense than artificial indoor lighting or smartphone screens. When this light hits the retina, the suprachiasmatic nucleus is activated through direct neural pathways, the master clock in the brain. A clear, brief cortisol rise is triggered, followed by a natural decline. At the same time, serotonin production begins, the precursor to melatonin. This means those who absorb light in the morning are already programming their sleep for the coming night. The circadian rhythm stabilizes. Metabolism receives a clear time signal: now is activity, now energy may be used. The third step appears unspectacular at first glance: slow forward walking. But behind this movement lies a neurobiological mechanism called optical flow. When the environment visibly moves past the body while walking, trees, houses, horizons, the amygdala, the brain's fear center, receives a specific signal: control and safety. Evolutionarily, forward movement meant exploration, hunting, autonomy. Stillness often meant danger. Studies show that this visual motion stimulus can reduce amygdala activity. Less fear means less stress means less cortisol, and less cortisol opens the possibility of releasing stored energy. A 10 to 15-minute morning walk therefore combines light, movement, and neurocalming into a single ritual. No high-intensity training, no overload, just rhythmic, controlled activation. The fourth step may be the most difficult because it has nothing to do with biochemistry, but with habit: protecting the first 30 minutes. No smartphone, no emails, no social media, no external input. The first minutes after waking determine the baseline activation of the nervous system. If the brain is immediately confronted with stimuli, opinions, conflicts, and demands, it switches into reactive mode. The sympathetic system dominates. The body remains in alarm. But if this period is protected, the parasympathetic system, the system for rest, digestion, and regeneration, can establish a stable foundation, and a body that starts in calm remains metabolically more flexible. When these elements are combined, a precise hormonal protocol emerges. In the first 10 minutes, hydrate. In the next 10 minutes, natural light. Then, calm forward movement. And only after about 90 minutes, the first coffee. No radical intervention, no expensive supplements, just synchronization with a biology that has existed for hundreds of thousands of years. When cortisol is properly guided in the morning, it loses its role as a fat storage signal. Metabolism becomes adaptive. Visceral belly fat, once protected by stress, becomes accessible. Weight loss is no longer forced. It becomes a side effect of a regulated system. But before implementing these principles, one important note is essential: not every body responds identically. Individuals with adrenal disorders, severe metabolic conditions, chronic sleep deprivation, or certain hormonal imbalances should always make changes under medical supervision. This content does not replace medical advice. The real question, therefore, is not how many calories were burned today, but what signals were sent to the body this morning. Perhaps control over stubborn belly fat does not lie in evening workouts, but in the first 30 minutes after opening your eyes. And that is exactly where metabolic freedom begins.
What becomes visible here is a fundamental principle of human physiology. The body does not respond only to what is eaten, but primarily to the signals that communicate safety or threat. Hormones are not isolated switches, they are messengers of an internal state. Cortisol, in this context, is neither good nor bad. In healthy dynamics, it is a conductor. It orchestrates the transition from sleep to activity. It mobilizes glucose, temporarily raises blood pressure, sharpens attention. It only becomes problematic when a clear morning signal turns into chronic background noise. Chronically elevated cortisol is associated in numerous studies with insulin resistance, increased visceral fat, and impaired metabolic flexibility. Research in stress physiology shows that persistently activated stress axes, particularly the HPA axis, hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, can shift fat metabolism long-term. Energy is preferentially stored, not released. Interestingly, research on so-called metabolic switching, described among others by neuroscientist Mark Mattson, confirms that the body requires phases in which it can alternate between glucose and fat burning. This switch does not happen automatically, it is hormonally enabled, and precisely this switch is blocked by sustained stress. That means even those who practice intermittent fasting, reduce meals, or count calories can sabotage this metabolic switch if the day begins in alarm mode. Another factor comes into play: sleep quality. If sleep was fragmented or too short, the cortisol awakening response is often more pronounced. Studies in chronobiology show that poor sleep correlates with higher morning cortisol levels and reduced insulin sensitivity the following day. This further amplifies the effects of the morning mistakes described. Thus, a modern paradox emerges. Humans live safer than ever before, and yet their bodies behave as if constantly threatened. Digital overstimulation, constant information flow, early stimulation, caffeine as an energy correction. These are cultural habits, but biologically they are stressors. And stress, from an evolutionary perspective, is a signal to conserve energy. Visceral fat in the abdominal region is not merely an aesthetic issue, it is metabolically active tissue. It produces pro-inflammatory messengers, influences insulin sensitivity, and is associated with cardiovascular disease. That is precisely why it responds so sensitively to hormonal changes. The good news, however, is this: the system is reversible. The body is adaptive when it is consistently signaled safety through light, through rhythm, through controlled activation. It begins to dial down old protective mechanisms. The metabolic switch becomes more flexible, cortisol spikes shorten, insulin signals become clearer, fat stores become accessible. But change does not happen through extreme measures. It happens through consistency. A calm start to the day may seem trivial. A glass of salt water may appear unspectacular. A walk without a podcast may seem inefficient. Yet biologically speaking, these simple actions are precise interventions in a sensitive hormonal system. The real question, therefore, is not how fast can belly fat disappear, but what environment is offered to the body daily. Is it placed into safety in the morning or into alert mode? Does cortisol become a clear impulse or a permanent condition? The decision is not made in the gym, not at dinner, but in the moment of waking. Perhaps metabolic health does not begin with discipline, but with rhythm, not with restriction, but with synchronization. And that is where the quiet power of a morning aligned with your own biology lies. If this topic has opened new perspectives, it may be worth consciously observing your own routines. What signals are being sent? What patterns repeat daily? Write in the comments which morning routine you currently practice, and which change surprised you the most. Because sometimes it is not what is eaten that decides, but how the day begins.
Now you may be asking yourself, so what should I do instead? Stop eating altogether? Never drink coffee again? No, this is not about restriction. It is about timing and hormonal intelligence. When you wake up in the morning, your body is in a sensitive hormonal transition. Cortisol is naturally elevated. That is normal. It helps you wake up. But at this exact moment, it is also determined whether your body shifts into fat-burning mode or remains in fat storage mode. Instead of immediately consuming sugar or fast carbohydrates, give your body 30 to 60 minutes. Drink water. Move lightly. A short walk, a few stretches, daylight on your skin. This signals safety to your nervous system, and safety means less stress response, more stable blood sugar, better fat mobilization. If you eat breakfast, make it protein-rich. Protein in the morning stabilizes insulin, reduces later cravings, and supports the preservation of muscle mass, and muscle is metabolically active. The more muscle mass you maintain, the higher your resting metabolic rate. That is science, not fitness mythology. And what about coffee? Ideally, wait 60 to 90 minutes after waking. During this time, your natural cortisol level gradually declines. When you then consume caffeine, it works more effectively, without unnecessarily driving your stress system further. Small adjustments, big impact. Because belly fat is not purely a calorie problem, it is a hormonal signaling problem, and your morning sets the tone for the entire day. When you understand how your body truly works, you do not have to fight harder, only act smarter.
Let's summarize. Habit number 1. Sugar or fast carbohydrates immediately after waking. They create an insulin spike at a moment when your body is hormonally most sensitive. Habit number 2. Coffee immediately after getting up. It amplifies the natural cortisol rise and keeps your body in stress mode longer.
Both together signal to your metabolism, store energy, do not burn it. And that is exactly why belly fat remains, even if you actually don't eat that much. The good news? You do not need an extreme diet. You do not need to starve. You do not need to do hours of cardio. You just need to use your morning strategically. 30 minutes without sugar, movement instead of scrolling, protein instead of a croissant, coffee with timing. These are not trends. This is biology. Your body is not working against you. It is simply responding to signals, and when you send the right signals, it begins to release stored energy, especially in the abdominal area, where stress hormones play a central role. If this video helped you, subscribe to the channel for more science-based strategies for fat loss and hormone optimization. And write in the comments, which of these two habits do you recognize in yourself? Because change does not begin with motivation, it begins with understanding. And now you know what your morning is really doing to your belly fat.